and thank you for inviting me and my colleagues to be a part of this very, very wonderful and powerful gathering. The last time I was with you, the sounds of ambulances in the street below my apartment just outside the windows here was a painful reminder of how the COVID-19 pandemic was ravaging New York City. We found it dissipated considerably here in New York City, which is a blessing, although the rest of our country is not making a lot of progress, and indeed, some cases falling behind in the effort to contain this pandemic. Here in New York City, the sounds of ambulances have been replaced by protesters and marchers from Black Lives Matter, which is a very, very welcome change. However, before I go any further, I want to do my own territorial acknowledgement. That's not something that's often done here in the United States. And I'm speaking to you today, of course, from Manhattan Island. As a student, I had been taught about how Native Americans had sold Manhattan to the Dutch, the equivalent of about $24 in beads. It was framed as New York City's first killer real estate deal, and that was kind of the end of the story. Actually, of course, that wasn't the end of the story. These otherwise unidentified Native Americans had a name and a language and a culture. They were the Lenape, who were mentioned this morning already in your territorial acknowledgement. They called their island home Mannahatta and settled in the southern part of the island, near where Trinity Church Wall Street is today. The Lenape, when they were forced to leave Manhattan by the European settlers, joined the Delaware Nation. And today, the Lenape people are living in those living in the United States speak English. Some also speak their original language, which is part of the Algonquin language family. There are now Lenape and Delaware communities located both in the United States and Canada. Today, there are an estimated 27,000 Native American New Yorkers, with a membership that includes Native Americans from over 72 nations. Anyone watching the news will know that the last several weeks have brought an heightened awareness of racial injustice issues here in the United States. While the focus is on police brutality in the current era, these issues have their roots in over 400 years of history, starting when the first African slaves arrived in North America in 1619. Much of that history has been erased or hidden from many of us. We are in the midst of a major reevaluation of that history, including the Civil War and the Confederacy, along with more recent events. The Episcopal Church must not be immune from reevaluating its own history in this regard. Many of our beautiful buildings and well-funded endowments, how many of our beautiful buildings and well-funded endowments have their origins in wealth created out of slavery? This is not a Southern issue, which I, having been raised here in the North, was taught to believe. Most mornings during the pandemic lockdown, I've been taking a walk in Central Park, which is just a few blocks from my apartment. I've reveled in watching the winter turn to spring and now turn to summer. The trees and flowers have bloomed, and birds have made Central Park a major migratory stop on their way to Canada. Central Park was also the scene of one of the major news events that has put racial justice issues on the top of the agenda here. A white woman whose dog was unleashed in violation of clearly stated rules threatened to call the police on an African-American man when he politely asked her to leash her dog so that he could continue bird watching undisturbed. When she called the police, she said that an African-American man was threatening her life. Nothing could have been further from the truth. She made plain the quotidian and deathly racism with which Black Americans contend. Indeed, the very history of Central Park, now a bucolic respite in the center of Manhattan, is steeped in racism. When the city fathers, and they were all fathers, decided to create the park in the 1850s, there was a community of 250 free African-American landowners, known as Seneca Village, on part of the land which they planned to build. The community had 3 churches, burial grounds, and a school. As the official guide to Central Park delicately puts it, the community dispersed in 1857 for construction of the new park, and they did not resettle together in a new location. The reality, of course, was much more brutal. The properties were seized with little or no compensation. Businesses were destroyed, farms were demolished, families were broken apart. and then the history was erased. Today, some of that history is being rediscovered, reclaimed, and retold. In fact, you can now go to Central Park, and they've designated the area where this Seneca village existed as an archaeological site. You can read about it. But we have a very long way to go to repair our country and institutions and atone for the evil we have done and the evil that has been done on our behalf. Last Friday, many people across the United States observed Juneteenth. 145 years ago, on June 19th, which was last Friday, but in 1865, 2.5 years after Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation and with the defeat of the Confederate forces by the Union Army, the last remaining slaves in Galveston, Texas were freed, ending chattel slavery in the United States. June 19th or Juneteenth, as observed in most parts of the country with parades, family gatherings, and readings of the Emancipation Proclamation. In addition, the great poem, Lift Every Voice and Sing, by James Weldon Johnson is often either read or sung. Johnson's poem was set to music by his brother, Rosamond Johnson, and is now included in the Episcopal Church's Hymnal 1982. It is sometimes referred to as the Black National Anthem. I'd like to close by reciting the first verse of that poem. To me, it is a miraculous affirmation of patriotism, hope, determination, and faith in the face of 400 or more years of racial violence and crimes. Lift every voice and sing, till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has brought us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has taught us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on until victory is won. Thank you.